you doing? Yeah, not too bad? How do you feel? Have you ever felt better than you do right at this moment? Think about what the difference is between that time and this time. I wonder what some of the things might be. It's just to think about while we're talking about this. Today, what I'd like to offer you are some thoughts around design for something that we've been talking about as embodied well-being. And you'll see, especially later this afternoon as Yvonne's talk comes on and she mentions the phrase embodied well-being, what we're talking about here is a little bit different. And one of the biggest takeaways I'd like to encourage you right away to think about as designers is why should you think about designing for embodied well-being? And it occurred to me that I should probably define that term. What the heck do we mean by well-being? If you ask the research councils in this country what is meant by well-being, they'll probably tell you it actually means sickness. If you use the term health in research, that usually means looking for health technologies, which means talking about people who have been sick. When we talk about people who are well, who are here today, perhaps not in the hospital, we're actually talking about something special, something new that hasn't been defined particularly well. And in fact, what we're going to see is a little bit about some problems in this space and trying to understand, well, why would you design for well-being if people are already well? What does that mean to support that and why it is important? First thing I'd like to offer you to check your own well-being is a bit of a perception check. If you're seeing, and the reason the coffee beans is sometimes you can't get to coffee. I don't know if you've ever had that problem here. You're coming back in, there's a little slow, there's a lot of line, what can you do? I'd like to give you two things that you can do to encourage you to think about the value of embodied well-being by giving you a coffee alternative that is free, cheap, and won't irritate too many people. The first thing to do is if you look at these circles, this is part of an assessment for vision. Vision is actually, as Susan was telling us this morning, is a cognitive thing. It's not just eyesight, it's our brain having to work to put ideas together, to put concepts together. If you can look at these two, how many of you are looking at these two and are already seeing a third one in the middle? That's the task, is to look at these two circles or sets of circles and see if by relaxing consciously your vision, you can actually see a third one begin to appear. Anybody got that yet? A few of you are healthy people. The rest of us have a little bit of work to do to get some control over our vision. So let's do a check. You've tried to do this. Now I'm actually going to ask you, stand up. Thank you very much. You will not be asked to sing. I find that one very challenging to do, in public especially. So what you'll notice is the foot. This is part of the test here, the drill, is that the foot actually contains, here's a cocktail party fact for you, 24% of the joints in our body. Our shoes, generally speaking, keep us from moving these joints very much. So all we're going to do right now to get some coffee simulation and wake up the sensory motor areas of our brain is, with some vigor, I'll demonstrate this for you, is we're going to go up on our feet and down on the heel rapidly so you feel your heel going. And you'll notice we're getting into sync from Susan's earlier talk already. And if you're feeling yourself laugh and breathe, that's really good. Let your hands shake, breathe out. This is good. You're smiling. Remember what I asked you about feeling? We could probably all stop now. So you can sit down. And if nothing else, that was fun. Try this again. See if you can relax your vision such that a third circle forms in the center. Anybody else getting it? A few more people are getting it. Plainly, we need to bounce some more, have more coffee. But this is part of the question around the desire of well-being. So what is well-being? The definition I hope you will take away from this in thinking about it is to deal with embodied well-being is to become excellent at having a body. And a body is a complex system of which the brain is a part. And why complexity is important, and You may hear it here first. I'm suggesting that complexity is going to become the new black. Today, neuro everything. That's the new black. Maybe later today, tomorrow, complexity. The reason why complexity is important in this case, and when thinking about the body, is that if we think about the body as a complex system of which the brain is a part, it suggests that if you affect one part of that system, it affects everything else. So by learning how we can become excellent at being embodied, we are able to achieve things that we like to do, especially with our brain. And so right now, the current well-being design space is very much looking like this. Anybody recognize this device? Fitbit, yes, this is the new Fitbit, which looks like some other applications, that one and possibly that one. And all of them have in common that they can count things. Computer devices, these kinds of monitors are very good at counting stuff. And so this is what well-being design space looks a lot like right now, at least in the commercial practices. It asks, what can we count? And it's not only things like steps that we can count how many pounds we have currently. We can also count things that are a little harder to catch automatically. The nice thing about the Fitbit and the fuel band and the jawbone up and the Wi-Fi scales is that they can do it just by using them. They give us a number back. We're supposed to understand what those numbers mean, I guess. But these other kinds of applications are calorie counting apps. So we can log what we ate manually, but at least automatically that can be translated into something that also has numbers. Calories. And if you read the research, you'll see that counting calories is not particularly helpful, not because of just the problem with counting calories as being a failed and doomed strategy for anybody who wants to lose weight, but also because the data itself is wrong. But be that as it may, it's something we can count, and that's a lot about what the research is in design. Well, not research, but commercial research. And the question comes up, what actually are we looking for? Well, all of this has become sort of called self-monitoring for behavior change. And this word change is really critical, and we'll come back to it in a sec. But the question that I've had is this really the territory of well-being design? Is it just monitoring this notion of behavior change? And by behavior change, it means with a Fitbit, of course, today I walk 3 steps, tomorrow I'm going to walk 4,532. And I'm very concerned about that last digit. I want to make sure I did 32, not 30. If this thing tells me I walked 4,732, and this other one tells me I walked 4,725, it's a piece of caca because it's not as accurate, and that means something to my health and well-being. So the territory here is something special. And do we have a map of this space yet? Is it just these kinds of counting devices? That's California. Once upon a time, in early map making, California was not attached to the United States, according to map makers. Perhaps they were looking at the future. Part of the fact of mapping, though, in this case, as maps got better, California became attached and unattached, and then it had an attached moment again, and we're sort of in an attached moment. And part of the work that we've been looking at has been to understand what is the territory of this well-being space, of this complex space. And so far, it seems like we're almost putting these artifacts of counting into just one area of the domain. And what I'd like to share with you today is a little bit more of the space we think, where designers in particular have an opportunity to help us become, there might be dragons there, is what might become part of this space. What is this opportunity? And I'm going to give you a 4-part model very quickly, and please talk to me afterwards about expanding on this model with you. Let me know what you think of it. The first part of the model, though, is this notion of a body, of embodiedness, that's really important. And again, I said as sort of a contrast to the way we've talked about in embodied cognitive psychology. The difference I would postulate, and Yvonne can certainly correct me later about this, would be to suggest that embodied interaction, something that we know about in the HCI space, Paul Dorsch made famous a decade or so ago, is this notion of the body moves in space. We are social creatures. We exist in culture. We signify things. We engage with things. And it's important to be in the body, in space, doing stuff. As was already noted this morning, when we speak with our voice and we open our bodies, it's different than reading things in text. Well, this is very true. The notion of embodiedness, though, is to say, let's open the black box of the body, space, and find out more about it so that we can be excellent when we are embodied. So we need to do a little work on the in-bodiedness in order to get to the embodiedness. And it's within that in-bodiedness that we have opportunities as designers caring about well-being and driving that excellence of the complex system to be able to say, we can intervene at different spaces here to help people be excellent in the body, to be good embodied citizens of a culture and making decisions around that space. And in fact, part of the cycle here, the second one, is actually a decision-making cycle where we can intervene. I'm going to talk about that. And then as we develop those patterns become part of our routine and daily practice. And it's very important actually for us to think about how do we get from something that's novel and potentially new. Again, if we think about embodied well-being, and that part of that might be eating our greens, there's a good reason to do that. We want that to become something that, Susan mentioned the term habit. We might want to think about that as routine, as something that's more constructed, conscious, deliberate, but that doesn't become effortful to practicing because it's just part of what we do. So getting there with health and well-being is kind of a goal state, but also so is this notion of having that state to help us construct culture anew. If we have a moment, I'll reflect on some of the issues around our current culture and how design has an opportunity as producers of culture to change and improve that. So today, though, we're going to just focus on these first two parts, a little bit about embodiedness, what some options there are, what does that mean to get under the hood of the embodied being, and look at the embodied being for embodied well-being. Well, without counting them all, these are ways we can think about the body. There happen to be 11 subsystems, if you wish, about the body. Some of them you've probably heard about and dealt with. Well, you've probably heard about all of these, from the skeletal system, respiratory system, the muscular system, cardiovascular, even our skin, etc. Let me just let you know there's 11, and there are quiz cards on the web that you can check out to make sure you know the 11. The reason for pointing to this is a lot to know about. This does seem to be very complex. Is there a way, as designers, that we can access this perhaps to look at behaviors that we'd like to support in a slightly more compact way? The answer is yes. If we focus on these 5 things and think about how we engage with these to be excellent, we will do extremely well. Each of these is linked to research on mortality. We need to do these things or we die. And some of them have already been mentioned and might be a bit of a surprise. We talked earlier about the notion of self-monitoring for behavior change. There's a lot in HCI around persuasion and persuasive technology. My suggestion in embodiedness is that we really don't need to change stuff. We need to tune it. It would be like saying, oh, I think I'm going to start to sleep at this point in my life. No, we already all sleep. We all eat. At some point we eat. Some people are into intermittent fasting, might not eat as frequently as they did before. That's cool. We all engage socially. If you're an introvert like myself, you might find that extremely challenging to do, and it takes more practice and effort, but we do tend to do it as part of our lives and our quality of life. We want that oxytocin release that we can get also from hugging, so physical contact is not a bad thing, but singing and again, bonding if you have the energy for that. See, I'm going into a threat posture right now, just thinking about that. And that reduces creativity. This I'll show you later. This is also very frequently what you might call the protect the squishy bits posture. Look for it among your friends at social situations. If you can't quite catch the pupil dilating, you can look for that one. But again, the high point here and what the ease of work for designers might be, I would suggest, is that because we do these already, we don't need to introduce new things, we just need to improve stuff that we're already doing. And that is a design opportunity. Where are we going to do that with persuasion is not necessary? Let's take a look at this notion of the decision cycle. Now, this is a cycle that we kind of developed ourselves based on rational design theory. And the nice thing about rational design theory and behavioral economics is it doesn't mean that all decisions are rational. It's just that a decision can be made, and you can make an excuse about it afterwards. And so when we look at why we do things, actually, if you ask somebody why they do something in a normal practice like eating or shopping or whatever, we often come up with sort of post hoc rationalizations for that practice because we've never really thought about it before. So we have an opportunity by engaging with folks around places where we tend to outsource information already, or we think we can do it ourselves. We make stuff up. And the reason for that, well, one of the biggest things here, why the tomato, is it's really hard to get people excited about saying, eat more tomatoes, you need to do this for your health and well-being. That doesn't attach to values. So if we understand those 5 things that we need to nudge and we can connect them with our beliefs, values, and knowledge already, de-threat, get people out of this position and into, oh, that's a wonderful thing, I'm going to try that, position with interacting with these big 5, as we've been calling them, the eat, move, et cetera, design is possible, intervention is possible, movement is possible, change that is tuning is possible. So here's an example. If we look at the start of this cycle, we can have a trigger. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but it does induce a threat response for most of us. Oh, you know, you put on weight. Oh, really? And I don't know why somebody says that to you, but they do, or says it to me from time to time, and it's like, really? Thank you very much for that. And so you see this posture here, you go home, you check it out. This is the first part of the cycle, is reflection. This is, for designers, a place where there is very little support. That's a big hint in the design space, to be able to say, how do we help somebody reflect? Well, generally speaking, we kind of DIY it. We look for measures. We ask ourselves, geez, if I'm fat, does that mean I can't get into my skinny jeans anymore? Who cares that those skinny jeans may be shrunk in the wash and they've now become a sacred artifact that could more easily hit on the wall than it would fit onto a human being? But this is the measure that we use to check. The next thing that we might think about is, what's the process? So when we reflect on whether a trigger is accurate or not, or whether we're going to do something about it or not, we tend to check in with the state, is this true, and the process. And again, very little help if somebody's put on weight for us to figure out, for instance, how did this happen? And here, the assumption might be, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to the gym as much anymore. I'm sitting around a lot more than I used to, be more active. That must be what it is. And so as part of the next part of the cycle, where again, there's opportunities for design to step in, it's to tell us, what are the situations, what are the solutions that are available to me? Can I identify some options, and then can I figure out the cost-benefit ratio of acting on those? So I might decide, well, there's a treadmill close by at work, or I've heard about this weird thing called CrossFit that some of my friends are doing. I could stand on my head, or I could be in a row. No, I don't really want to be on a rowing machine. I don't want to do this. But I can run, or I can walk the treadmill. I'll go to the work. So you've made a DIY decision based on some knowledge somewhere about what to do, and then you do it. And after you've done it for a bit, maybe once or so, and you feel kind of, you reassess. Did that work? You might even introduce some new measures. Look, we have a scale now. We have a technology, not just our old genes, but we have a technology. And it hasn't really changed much. Where's the intervention to say whether this is the correct measure? Scales suck. That's from months now of research that I can tell you that with considerable force, that again, it tends to introduce things like, ooh, I went up or down a pound and my life is upset by this fluctuation, when it's natural. So part of the problem here might actually be, are we actually looking at, when we go through this cycle, which we do constantly in evaluating, assessing practices, especially when they're new and they're not part of our routine, before they become part of our belief structure, whether or not this has actually been the right thing to do. So for instance, if we're looking at this situation again, where we tap into somebody's beliefs about a position, their belief is that to lose weight I have to exercise. Exercise is not the biggest driver for weight loss. changing in food. I'm sorry to use the word change. Tuning one's food slightly differently will have a faster effect all of the time than exercise. Exercise is fabulous for many parts of well-being, but if the goal is weight loss, that ain't it, it's food. How do you connect people with these things? So this is why looking at this process of where we can intervene as designers, this is harder than counting stuff. This is harder than telling somebody how many steps they've walked. It's harder than telling them how much sleep they've had. This is where there are design challenges and opportunities around doing things extremely well. Let me give you another example of a belief. This is recently talking with some grad students, and believe me, if you can affect people who are in their late teens, early 20s to do something physical when we all are at this time in our lives thinking that we're going to live forever and survive anything. And again, we tend to believe our practices are correct. We heard about pulling all-nighters as a regular strategy for making a deadline. Not necessarily an appropriate economy of practice in that. So someone is saying, for instance, I don't have any time to cook. I would like, the interesting thing is here is they might say, I would like to cook. I think that'd be a great idea, but I don't have any time and that takes forever. That's a quote. And what we've been finding in talking with participants is, generally speaking, is I don't have time is code for either I've never done it or I don't know how. And so I'm making, again, assumptions about what practice is. And so when we do that, we hit problems about how we could possibly intervene as designers to affect change in new ways that don't have to do with counting and that have an opportunity to move us as we get into affecting people's beliefs into new possible routines that are easier to adjust to because we have simply looked at tuning opportunities for better practice. So the challenge I offer to you is to ask, where is it possible for us to connect as designers with beliefs instead of counting, for instance? How do we help somebody with a piece of technology turn to that technology at a time they're trying to figure out, well, I think I've put on weight, I'm just going to have to figure out what to do. One possibility, and I'll leave this as kind of a final thought for you, and I'd be delighted to take questions if we have a moment now. One final thought might be, instead of trying to think about a mobile device, why not put the device in the mirror? Just if you step up to the mirror and say, you know, I just feel like crap, I don't think I look so great. What if the mirror was to come back to you and say, well, actually, I could tell you about how well you've been doing over the past 6 months. Or I could engage with you to say, well, how can I help you with that? What do you think about that? What do you think you should do? And have that conversation so that, again, the model, the learning model is not so hard behind that, to be able to say something like, well, I think I should move more. It's a small set of 5 things to be able to say, maybe that would be a great idea. But how about we take a little time to look at some food stuff too? Because if you've been, having all sorts of sensors around your home of the future knows what you eat, et cetera, it could say, want to look at this a little bit? Here's a little place where we can help you take some sugar out of your life. And research shows that if you take sugar out of your life for a couple of weeks, you'll lose weight without even noticing it, because sugar's in your toothpaste. So change your toothpaste and you'll start losing weight. I'm not kidding. That's the really sad part. So I had so much more I'd like to tell you about here, but I am standing between you and lunch. But I would like to give you a couple of heuristics to think about for your lunch, just as, again, one thing you've got that you didn't have before is a coffee alternative, though this does look like you have had too much coffee, doesn't it? But that's something that you can check. The vision is cognitive a little bit, that we have 5 things that all we need to think about is that we eat, move, sleep, cogitate, and engage with others. And by cogitate, we mean a mental challenge. And within that space as well, you see, I'm forgetting what I was going to offer you as a going away gift. Oh, right, is that for design, for eating and thinking about this, think about finding, if you're caring about feeding your brain, so that you can get through the rest of the afternoon to optimize what you can take in is think about having greens wherever you can find them. Protein, that means something usually that's had eyes, if you don't know what that is. Or for the vegetarians is a dark, rich color. Have lots of that takes care of that. Healthy fats, fish, or again, the vegetarian side of things. What do the fish eat that make them have healthy fats? Algae. So that's a really good source of good fats. Our brains actually require things. The reason I was touching on the greens, the proteins, and the fats, just so you know, is that our brains actually evolved to have to require certain kinds of fats. And unfortunately, it's not butter, even though butter's fantastic. Don't let anybody tell you about low fat. That's a lie. Stay away from sugar in its refined forms. Enjoy it in fruits and in its whole context. So for lunch, look for greens, proteins, things that have eyes, and healthy fats. Stay away from sugars unless you deserve them. And if you want to deserve them and feel good about it, no, seriously, you can do this. You just have to deplete them out of your muscles, which would mean doing a whole lot of these before you go to have your lunch. If you do about 40 of them, you've burned enough to have a sugar cube, maybe. But again, in terms of thinking about the design challenge is not the easy stuff to do, the stuff you can count, but where you can engage with people making decisions that align with their values, knowledge, and current practice. Think about tuning those things, build the magic mirror for them, for all of us, and we will be excellent, much more excellent at this complex system, which is our amazing bodies to which a brain happens to be attached. Serve the body, enhance the brain, and we need that to be creative and wonderful people, which is what the whole design thing is about, surely. Thank you very much.